Hey there, Anomalies. Welcome to another episode of the Anomalous Educator podcast, where we help teachers make a side income or replace their entire income online. Today, my guest is Rachael Story.
And I was like, wow, I really wish I had just done this from the beginning.
We're going to talk about how she got into teaching English online, which Mexican beach her and her husband spend enjoying between their classes most of the year, and how you can start and grow a career teaching English online yourself. Enjoy the show. So Rachael, thanks again for coming on the show, and we have a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right in. First thing I want to start with is tell me a little bit about your journey from where you were in Tennessee to how you became a teacher, and then how you became a teacher that just travels around the world and teaches English. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so back in about 2009, fall of 2009, I was ready to join the workforce as a full-time employee. I had graduated school with my bachelor's in music industry studies. So I wanted to head to Nashville. With Nashville being Music City, I thought it would be a good place to go. And I spent like a solid 3 months doing a proper job search. I bought a pantsuit. I walked around Music Row.
Not a pantsuit.
Yeah, I did. I bought a pantsuit, put it on, walked around Music Row, passing out my resume to just every, music industry place that was there. And when I finally did get an interview, the entry-level position had been given to someone who had held a higher position and had been laid off. This was at the height of the economic recession, and there were no jobs to be found anywhere. We hit a string of really bad luck. The house we were living in, where we were living in the attic because we couldn't afford anything else, was broken into. A bunch of our stuff got stolen. A few weeks later, my car was broken into. It was terrible. So Sasha and I were just looking for any way out. And he had already spent about almost a year in Beijing teaching English. And he really wanted to go back. And he's like, just come on, just try it. If you don't like it, we can always come back. Because I was saying, no, I have no experience teaching. I have a degree in music business. How am I going to go be an English teacher? And he's like, don't worry, you'll figure it out. Let's just go. And so we did that.
And what did your friends and family think of that big jump?
Well, I had actually met Sasha a year before that, which was about a month before he moved to Beijing. And so we were in contact for that full year. And so my family they were already familiar, hearing about Sasha. They'd heard me talk about him a million times. And I had mentioned the idea of maybe going to China to visit him. Maybe, just maybe, going to live for a few months. So they were already kind of used to the idea. But half of my family was like, oh my gosh, why would you want to do that? And the other half of my family were like, yeah, go for it.
Nice. And you listened to the latter half of your family, it sounds like, and you went to China.
Yes.
So what did you find once you got there? You said, you didn't really have that much experience. You started teaching English. How did you get that experience? How did you kind of get up to the level you wanted to be at?
Well, Sasha already knew how to find jobs in Beijing. He already knew those websites where those classified ads could be found. So we managed to find me a really cushy job, almost as basically a glorified babysitter, where I was tutoring 2 little girls who lived in the suburbs outside of Beijing. So I would go to their home and tutor them 4 days a week. And so that's how I started off in Beijing. And for the first month and a half, 2 months I was there, that was all I did, was just go and tutor these 2 little girls.
And how did that transfer into English education? And how did you kind of transition from that into teaching English to adults and other people?
So as I progressed through that, I started looking for other jobs, as I felt more comfortable, being in China and actually teaching English. And I started out super part-time in a kindergarten. And that was only 2 days a week. And so then I just built up from there and just kept adding in really short-term part-time positions in a middle school. And then eventually after about a year, we planned to go back to the States to visit for a few months. And one of my friends who had been teaching in this training center for adults for a long time, they were having trouble hiring people because the visa regulations had changed. And at that specific time, you had to be in your home country to get the working visa. And he was like, since you guys are going home, you really should interview with this company because you'll be able to get the working visa at home. Just do it and see how it goes. And so Sasha and I both interviewed with this company and they said, yes, we want to hire you. And it worked out. Since we were already coming back to the States, we were able to get those working visas and then come back to China and start teaching adults.
So at what point, since you didn't train to be a English teacher in college, at what point did you decide this is something I'd like to do for the long term? Because it's been a few years now. It's not just, 6 months ago that you went through all of this. Was there kind of a turning point there where you said, really, this is something I enjoy?
Yes, actually there was, because like when I arrived in China, I had no idea if I was even going to like it. So that's why I tried everything. That's why I tried teaching all kinds of different age groups. And that's why I just kept stacking part-time jobs on top of one another. And I got to a point where I said, yes, I do enjoy this, but I really only really enjoy teaching it to the students who actually want to be there, which is how I realized that it was adults that I preferred teaching. And so that's why I interviewed with that position at the training center.
Okay. And so you were teaching at the training center, and at some point you made a transition to starting to teach online. What was that like?
Yeah, there was quite a while in between. We started traveling in between. And so that's kind of what led to the decision to teach online, because we saved up a lot of money and then, we quit our cushy jobs at the training center and did a full 14-month gap year, and then moved to a different city in China and went back to teaching jobs again and thought, oh yeah, we did all that traveling. We'll be good to stay in one place for a while. But we weren't. We had the travel bug really bad. So we finished that, and then we moved to Bali. And in between living in the second city called Kunming and moving to Bali, Sasha's brother had started teaching English online, but it was through a program at his university that had partnered with a company in South Korea. So I knew that teaching online was a thing, and it's really hard for foreigners to get jobs in Bali if they don't have some specialized skill. So that was when I really started to look for online teaching jobs pretty rigorously. But the company that my brother-in-law had taught for, that had folded, it didn't work out. So I was looking, couldn't find anything. Finally, about 2 weeks before we were going to leave Bali, I saw an ad for VIP Kid pop up in one of the Facebook groups that I was in. And I looked at the requirements and read the benefits and everything and thought, this actually kind of sounds too good to be true, but I'm qualified, so I might as well apply and see what happens. The very next morning, I had an email inviting me to an interview. And so I did the interview and I was hired, and I got through their full recruitment process in about 2.5 weeks.
And we'll talk a little bit more about their recruitment process and kind of the next phase of the interview, where we kind of get into the meat potatoes of working online. So at this point, you're traveling and teaching online. It sounds like a dream come true to a lot of people. Was it? And what were your favorite parts about kind of doing that? What are your favorite parts about doing that, since you're still doing it?
Well, I think my favorite parts are definitely the freedom and flexibility. Those are definitely my two favorite parts. And at first I was a little hesitant because, like I said, it really did sound too good to be true. So from Bali, we were heading back to the States, and we didn't come back with an exit strategy. But we had a lot of travel plans within the country. So we thought, okay, we'll just test this out, see how it goes, kind of get our feet wet a little bit. And it went really well. That first 6-month contract went really well, even with all of the traveling that we were doing. And at that time, it wasn't quite as flexible as it is now. There was a minimum weekly requirement of classes. And so when I realized that I was able to meet that requirement and do all of that traveling, I was like, okay, I can do this. And then Sasha decided to go ahead and apply, and he got hired. And so we were like, okay, wow, we can actually go anywhere anywhere with this job. Okay, let's give it a try. And so we actually took the bus to Mexico, but this time traveling was different. We couldn't be as spontaneous. We could really only stay in Airbnbs, no more hostels. So we were having to message Airbnb hosts a lot to ask about their internet speed and make sure that their space met our requirements. So the traveling itself was different. And we also realized very quickly that we couldn't travel nearly as fast as we could before because we were teaching really early in the morning. And so that was one major change that we realized that we had to make. But, as we went along and, kind of the whole trial and error of like teaching and traveling and just testing it out, we were able to make the necessary adjustments and figured out how to make it work for us.
You kind of alluded to a little of this when you were talking about it. So that's the good side of, teaching online and traveling around the world. What's the dark side? What are the parts that you don't see on those blogs that are kind of always trying to sell you on the world of traveling and all the rest of it? You and I know this. We love to travel. It's amazing. We wouldn't change it for anything else. But people should know that there's other sides to it as well. You might have to sacrifice some things. Could you talk a little bit about your experience in that sense?
Yes. So the dark side of teaching online while traveling is that it's very exhausting. Like just being completely honest, especially the kind of online teaching we do because we teach kids. And so we have to be really energetic and really animated. And so that's kind of draining, especially when you're having to do it, for a couple of hours at a time. So Sasha and I have realized that your time is split into 3 different categories when you're traveling as a digital nomad. There's working time, there's sightseeing time, and then there's what we call socializing time. And that's going to be different for everyone. That can be, dinner and drinks, happy hour, going out with new friends that you've made, going to a concert or some kind of show. And what we've realized is that when you're traveling and teaching online, one of those things has to get cut. Like you can't do all 3 in a day and wake up bright and chipper and ready to do it again the next day. So you have to kind of be more strategic with how you're going to spend your time.
So what are some of the things you guys came up with to kind of be strategic about spending your time while you're traveling and teaching online?
So we actually plan out our travels much more than we used to. And we figure out kind of the big sightseeing things we want to do. And then we'll have days where we do both working time and socializing time. Or sorry, working time and sightseeing time. Then if we want to go out one night, because like for Sasha and I, when we like to go out, sometimes we can stay out a little bit past the bedtime that we need to keep if we're going to wake up and teach again the next morning, at least on this side of the world where we've been spending most of our time. So if there's some sort of socializing we want to do, then we won't book any classes for the next morning.
Okay, so some of this company you work for, BIP Kids, gives you kind of that kind of flexibility.
Yes, exactly. They no longer have weekly minimums, and you can open as many class times as you want or as few as you want. It doesn't matter.
Well, this is going to be a perfect place for us to take our break, because right after the break, we're going to jump into the details of working online, the class times, the technology, how to get jobs, all those kind of things with Rachael. So stick around.
We interrupt our regularly scheduled programming for this important announcement. Are you suffering from chronic teacheritis? Do you suffer from regular outbreaks of, "This is not why I became a teacher. I can't make ends meet on a teacher's salary," or "Why do I have to use this useless material for my students?" Then a weekly dose of the Anomalous Educator podcast could be the pseudo-magical solution you are looking for. It has unscientifically been proven to help teachers cure teacheritis and learn how to make a side income, or replace their entire income by teaching online using methods they know are best without having to use some government-mandated material. It has also been shown to provide more free time to spend with friends and family. To report your case of teacheritis today, please log on to the website www.anomalouseducator.com or subscribe to this podcast. The Anomalous Educator podcast is most effective if taken with a glass of wine after a hard day at school. Warning! Side effects may include sudden urges to quit your jobs, travel the world, and start improving educational systems and lives of students everywhere. Please consult your physician before starting. We now return to our regularly scheduled programming.
So we're back with Rachel's story, and we're talking about teaching English online. If you missed the first half, she talked about her journey of starting out in Tennessee and ending up being a globe-trotting English teacher all around the world. Now we're going to get into some of the technical sides. How do you get a job? What do you do teaching? So Rachel, let's start with the first one. How do you become an online English teacher? Can anybody who just speaks English start teaching tomorrow, or are there certain things that they should know first?
Technically, yes. But of course, I feel like with any job, there are some things that you should know first. For most of the jobs that I'm an expert on, that I know the most about, majority of them require a 4-year bachelor's degree. But they don't all require you to be a native English speaker. So if you're not from a native English speaking country, as long as you have a neutral accent, meaning that you're pretty easy to understand, you can get a job with some of these companies that I'm familiar with. There are a few that don't require a bachelor's degree, but for those that do not, you should also have some other certification or credentials, such as a TEFL or a TESOL certificate. And that's just a certification showing that you've been trained in how to teach the English language.
Do you know what TEFL and TESOL stand for those who are looking for it online?
Yes, TEFL stands for Teaching English as a Foreign Language, TEFL. And TESOL stands for Teaching English as a Second Language to Speakers of Other Languages.
Wow, that's a long one.
Yeah, that one's a little bit long.
And is there any real difference, between the two courses, a TEFL and a TESOL course, for example?
At their core, there is a difference. These days, they're kind of used interchangeably, but at their core, the TEFL, TEFL, is meant for teaching students who, like in a country where English is not the native language. So in China, for example. A TESOL is where you would be teaching English inside a country where English is the first language, but to speakers of other languages. So, for example, in America, teaching English to people from other countries.
Oh, I actually didn't know that distinction. So that's really interesting. So what else would you need to teach online from the technical side? So let's say you got through the qualifications, you're a native English speaker, or you're a non-native English speaker with a TESOL or TEFL certificate. What do you need? What's the minimum technical requirement to start teaching online? Kind of mics or what else?
Well, really just like a headset. Most of the companies prefer for you to have a headset with an external mic, a headset that covers both ears. But you can also do it with earbuds that have an external microphone. I would not recommend doing it without headphones of some sort, because audio is the most important thing when you're doing anything online. And so if your student can't hear you very well, it's not going to be an enjoyable class for you or the student. The second thing you need is a computer with a decent enough memory and sort of processor, because if you're doing video classes, your computer is going to need to keep up with the demand.
Nice. And I'll actually add one little tip to that one as well, since for those of you who've been listening to a few episodes, you know that I'm actually in this field as well. I kind of run a company that does similar things. There's this ancient piece of technology that most people haven't heard of called a wire. So if you actually buy something called an Ethernet cable and your computer is able to do it, plug yourself in with one of these wires into your modem. You can actually increase your internet speed 10x to 50x for like $5 by doing that. Most people think wireless is as fast as plugging in with your computer. It's not. So if you're near a modem, buy a wire for $5, plug it directly into the modem, and you will be shocked. That's much better than upgrading your internet speed and paying double to your internet company. So just a little quick tip there for anybody who's able to. It doesn't work for everybody. So if you have an iPad or something, you're out of luck. But you were going to say, Rachel?
I will add to that I travel with a retractable Ethernet cable for that very reason. And my personal laptop doesn't have an Ethernet port. So I have a USB adapter so I plug it into the USB port on my computer, and then the retractable Ethernet cable plugs into that. And you'll need to make sure in advance that wherever you'll be staying, if you are traveling, that you'll be able to access the router. So that's something to ask in advance. just for future reference.
Perfect. I actually didn't know there was a conversion to a USB, so I've learned something new today as well, because my wife's computer is the same. It's one of those super slick thin ones, and I tried, it's not even thick enough to fit an Ethernet cable into it, so it definitely didn't work. Awesome trick. So, okay, they have the qualifications, they have the technology. Where do they go to find some work online?
Okay, so I am an expert in companies that are based in China because I was teaching in China for a long time, and now I teach for a Chinese-based company. It's called VIP Kid, but there are several others. They are Magic Ears is one, Dada. There's one called Wales English. There's one called Go-Go Kid. And let's see, Say ABC is another one that's owned by VIP Kid. And I always tell people, if you are from North America, if you are qualified for VIP Kid, then go for VIP Kid, because they really are the best in terms of pay and flexibility. And then if you are not from North America, then I say go for Say ABC, because they are owned by VIP Kid. So it's just as high quality. Like the lessons are high quality and everything's really good.
So could you walk some people through the application process for VIP Kids or Say ABC? Pretty much the same company, right? So what would it be like if somebody's applying for a job? What steps do they have to go through?
They're all pretty similar. So I'll just tell you VIP Kids, because the other companies are usually a variation of that. So first, you'll go online and you'll manually fill out the application, or some of them have you upload your resume or CV. Then you'll be invited for an interview, and that's the same as just any sort of job interview. They just ask you a couple of questions about your past experience and to introduce yourself a little bit. And then you'll do a quick demo class, and they will send you the materials in advance for the demo class. And it's really quick. It's usually only about 10 minutes. And that's just to make sure that you understand the sort of online teaching techniques that they look for. Then once you pass that, then you will be invited to do a mock class. And a mock class is actually a full-length class where you're teaching, usually the mock class mentor is also a teacher for that company. They just also help do these mock classes. And usually they will pretend to be a little 5-year-old kid, and you'll have to go through.
I wouldn't want that job.
Right? So if you have issues, some people have issues with that, like looking at an adult who's pretending to be a child. And so I will say that if this is something you're considering doing, it's something that you have to think about and just kind of remind yourself, you have to actually picture a 5-year-old child on the other side of that screen, even though that's not what it is, because it's just a test to make sure that you're going to use the correct teaching techniques and correct their mistakes and do it in a way that they want. So here's the thing about a lot of these online teaching companies is they create the lessons. So you don't have to spend any time lesson planning, but then they want to make sure that all of their teachers are kind of teaching them in the same style. So that, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but then teachers are interchangeable. And that's why students can try out different teachers and find the one that they like. And so that just makes it easier for everyone. And that's kind of how it works. So then you'll have one mock class. In some cases, you'll have to do a second mock class. And that depends on the company. For VIP Kid, you do certification mock classes. And that's where you're getting certified for their different levels of curriculum. And then usually from there, it's just a matter of signing a contract, submitting to a background check, and then that's it.
Nice. So do you normally stay with the same students, or do the students stay with the same teachers, or do the students generally bounce around with different teachers?
It depends on the company. But with VIP Kid, the parents and their children can choose the teacher that they want. And that's also very flexible. So you'll end up with some regular students. I have some regular students that I have class with every week, sometimes 2 or 3 classes a week. I have students that I'll teach a couple of times a month maybe, and for a few months and then not see them again. And then some students, I teach them once and then I never see them again.
Nice. So it gives you a level of flexibility. And I'm assuming you can choose your students as well, right? If you don't like a student, is there a way that you can not take a class with them? I'm kind of curious if there's some kind of system in place for that.
No.
Oh, so you have to take a student whether you like them or not.
Yes.
Well, it's part of any job, I think, that's out there.
Right.
So now I'm going to ask a question that's a little more sensitive, and I don't actually know if you're going to know the answer to this, but it kind of goes back to some of my experience. Back when I was applying for the Peace Corps, I was considering also teaching English overseas through programs specifically like JET and in China. Unfortunately, after doing some research online, I found that since I look Asian, I couldn't, simply because some of these places, and I realized that there was kind of the stereotype of what an English speaker should look like. Do you have any experience seeing that yourself, both in your time in China and online? And has it changed in the last few years in your experience?
Yes, I have definitely noticed that. And I definitely have heard of some teachers not being, able to take a job because of their appearance. Mm-hmm. Yes, it is because of the stereotype, but it's also because a lot of the positions that really want that stereotypical look, they tend to be for-profit training centers. And that's really the most important thing for them is their bottom line. But when you're teaching through an actual school or through like a quality training center, then looks don't matter. So if people are being rejected from a teaching position, whether it be abroad or online for their looks, then that's a red flag for that company anyways.
Nice. That's actually a great tip. And I'm glad that the industry is going in the right direction there. At least the legitimate companies are seeing that it's quality, not necessarily quote unquote ethnic background, right? Because as people can hear, I sound like I'm from Boston, which is where my family is from. But, my mother's Filipina. So that would have disqualified me in some of those places, which is why I ended up not going down that route, went to the Peace Corps where that was not a thing. So I want to end up with two quick things before we get to the final part of the interview. The first one is, what are some tips and tricks for getting through the interview, let's say at VIP Kids? Non-sleazy tricks. So none of those, pass them $30 on PayPal before you go into the interview or anything like that. So what are some tips and tricks you can give some people?
The most important thing I can say is take some time to learn about some of the teaching techniques, and they'll tell you what they are in advance. And I can also tell you that the number one thing they look for is TPR, which stands for Total Physical Response. And that is essentially using body language to teach a word or a phrase to the student, because at least for VIP Kid, it's full English immersion. You're not using any of their language. And so for a very beginner student, there's no other way that they can understand you besides body language. So if you're teaching the word eat, you want to pretend like you're holding some sort of food and actually bite it to show eat. The same for drink. TPR is the number one thing they look for. And then the second most important thing is to grade your language. And that means to not use too many words. So think about yourself learning another language. And if, a native Spanish speaker comes at me with a full sentence of Spanish, I'm just going to be flabbergasted. But if they say just the 2 or 3 words that I know that also get the point across, then I'm going to have a much better understanding.
Great. And then I like to end every main interview with one question. If somebody wants to follow you down the route you followed, you've been following for the last few years, what is one bit of actionable advice that you can give them to get them started on their journey?
I would say get yourself a TEFL certificate because, as I've already told you, when I went to China, I didn't have any teaching experience whatsoever. And in those first several jobs, I was just really sort of improvising and kind of making it up as I went along. In fact, the first in-person demo I ever did was terrible. It was really bad because I had no idea what I was doing. And I had been teaching English for almost a year already when I finally got my TEFL certificate, and it made me such a better teacher. My teaching skills improved so much after that. And I was like, wow, I really wish I had just done this from the beginning. Nice.
So anybody who wants to follow Rachael in the journey she's taken, go out there and get a TEFL certificate. We'll put some links in the show notes as well, because I'm aware of a few schools that allow you to get certification. You can do it locally. You can also do it online. Just make sure it's a good school, because I also know that there's a lot of these people out there that you pretty much just pay money to and they give you a certificate, but you're trying to get the information out of it. It's not the paper. It's really the experience of teaching you're going for. Would you agree, Rachael?
Yes, precisely. I'm really glad that you said that. Make sure that whatever TEFL you get is from an accredited organization.
Perfect. We're going to take a final break and then come back for what my favorite part, the pop quiz. And you'll also be able to get some of Rachael's contact information if you want to contact her and get some more information. We'll be back in a few. Hey there, Anomalies. Ray here. I hope you're enjoying this interview. This is just a short reminder that if you like what you're hearing on the Anomalous Educator, you should subscribe to the show on wherever you get your podcasts. That way you won't miss any of our weekly episodes. If you have time to take that extra step, you can leave a review for me as well. If you prefer to tell me directly what you think of the show, just go to the website anomalouseducator.com. That's ANOMALOUSEDUCATOR.com. Yeah, it's a mouthful. And you can email me directly through our Contact Us page. Thanks in advance. Now, back to the show. And we're back for the final part of the interview, my favorite, the pop quiz. And I'm looking at Rachael. I can see beads of sweat on her forehead because she's probably, with all the questions that are coming up. So we're going to jump right into it. So Rachael, I'm going to ask you a few questions and as quickly as possible, answer them. Don't think too much about them. It's always fun. You ready?
Ready.
Okay. If an animal could talk, which one would swear the most?
A monkey.
I would agree with that. What is the best kind of cheese in the world?
Gouda.
What's really popular now that 5 years from now we're going to be really embarrassed about?
Oh, that's tough. Probably the amount of stock that we put into social media.
Okay. One sentence. Describe the English language to somebody who's never heard of it.
Difficult and complicated, but really fun when you get to know it.
If you got arrested today and nobody told them why, what would your friends and family think you were arrested for?
Oh, geez. Probably just aggressively giving someone a piece of my mind.
Wonderful. And the last one, how do people contact you?
I have a lifestyle and travel blog that I run together with my husband, Sasha. It's gratefulgypsies.com. And you can also find us on social media. We are Grateful Gypsies on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. We also have a YouTube channel and on Twitter, but that's our least active social media channel.
Awesome. So you guys are everywhere. Well, Rachael, it was awesome having you on the show. People can get in touch with you. Everybody learned a lot, and hopefully we'll have a lot more qualified English teachers teaching online pretty soon.
Wonderful. Thanks for having me.
And that's it for our show. I hope you enjoyed this chat with a versatile Rachael Story. If you're looking for another example of how you can make a living online by teaching English without actually giving live classes, check out episode 1 of our show with Gabby Wallace. If you like this episode of the Anomalous Educator podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. In our next episode, we'll be talking to Alex Asher. He's the founder of LearnCube.com. We're going to talk about the challenges and rewards of creating an online learning platform from scratch. Talk to you all next week.